Hello and welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, a channel for film reviews, discussions and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner and today I'm joined with a new co-host. George couldn't make it this week, he had a very busy schedule, so today we're joined with Tom Woods, who's a good friend of mine and he's a big Terminator fan, so he's agreed to help me out in this week's show. So I guess you can consider this video as sort of a second part to the one we uploaded earlier. The main show this week was T1, T2. This is just an extension of that where we're going to be talking about Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines and Terminator Salvation. So I guess before we get into our reviews on that, why don't you just kind of tell us where you sort of stand on the Terminator series?
Well, I'd like to start by saying thanks for having me, Chris.
That's all right.
This is always a pleasure to discuss films with you.
Mm-hmm.
Where I stand on Terminator, I love Terminator. I love everything about Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
Because my favourite Terminator film is the original. I know that it's not the best film out of the original two.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is the better film. But I just can't help but love the sort of 80s sort of neon vibe to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, and I've heard that quite a lot actually. It seems to be a lot like the Alien franchise, like the first two. In fact, you can kind of look at the progression of the Alien series against the Terminator one and see a lot of similarities with it. The first Alien film was obviously the more horror thriller aspect, which goes with Terminators. It was very much a cat and mouse chase film. It was scary in parts. Like Arnold was scary, was imposing, and there was that constant threat level. Whereas Aliens and Terminator 2, directed by the same person, obviously James Cameron, they're very much more action-orientated films.
I think the Alien comparison is pretty good. Although I kind of suggest that the first Alien film is by far the better film, in miles better. I mean, Aliens is just good. It's good schlock, and that's it. It's popcorn entertainment and nothing else. I think the sort of hamminess and cheesiness of Arnie's acting kind of suited it, and his not so much cheesiness. I mean his robotic acting, because I mean let's face it, he is not a very good actor.
No, but I talked about this in the main show with T1. Really, that was the film that put his name on the map. Before that, he'd been in Conan, and obviously he got some recognition from that. But it was really Terminator which, took his career off. And even since then, if you think of his most famous role, it is probably the Terminator.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he has done all the other action films, but the one that really, really stands out is his Terminator role, and it's the one that everyone remembers him for. I mean, or Predator, but That's...
But anyway, from there, obviously T2 comes out 1991, huge success, everyone loves it, and then the series kind of goes away. And I think part of the reason for that is that 2 did end fairly definitively. They stopped Judgment Day from happening. The Terminators had gone, and it was the last shot of the movie was kind of the road just going on, which symbolised the future course of history had been altered. 12 years later, though, we get Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. Now, it's an interesting one. I don't know much about the history of it, sort of like how the idea came around, or I think it was probably that Terminator was a big household name. We're seeing it nowadays with movies where, they're constantly bringing old franchises back for remakes and sequels and stuff, so it was probably just a case of that. It is interesting. This was actually the second Terminator film I ever watched. I watched them in a pretty unusual order. I watched 2 first, and I just watched the hell out of that as a kid. And then it was around the time that T3 was just about to come out, so I went to see that at the cinema, and then it wasn't until after I saw that I went back to the first one.
Right.
But did you see this film in the cinema when it came out, or did you see it much later?
I saw it much later. This was around. Trying to think of the release date for this.
It was 2003.
It's about 2003. Yeah. I probably would have watched it on very bad DVD
Yeah.
or video, if video was still around at that time. I
I
can't even
think it
remember.
was just kind of phasing out around that time and DVD was coming in. But
But yeah, I remember I didn't watch it at the cinema. That's the main thing. I
yeah.
think.
But with this one, which is really noticeable, is the tone of it. And I think that's probably the biggest problem you'll hear people say about this film is that it does go in a much more sort of PG-13, um, sort of, I don't want to say slapsticky humour, but there's a lot more humour with it.
Yeah,
Arnie seems a bit more goofy in this one, and that's sort of sustained throughout the rest of the series. And judging by the trailers for Genesis, it looks like they're still going that route with him.
yeah. I mean, it is kind of. I mean, it was around the time when the trend setting of doing the PG-13 films was just starting.
Mm,
So I mean, they all with over here with the introduction of the 12 rating accompanied by an adult. I mean, kids could go and see this film if it even was a 12.
mm,
But the rating system is just kind of screwed up, and kids could go and see this accompanied by an adult, and it just kind of got to the point where it wasn't about making good movies anymore. It was about just kind of making the movie and then uh, for for as big of an audience as possible just to try and get the sales in.
mm.
And I think that this is kind of where it started, and I mean you'll still see it now with stuff that really should be much more mature, but isn't. I mean, I can see we're kind of getting out of it a little bit with Mad Max, but
Yeah.
still, it's still very much prominent.
Yeah, and I mean, with remakes, one that comes to mind, another one from the 80s was the recent RoboCop film.
Oh yeah,
The original is an 18. It's massively violent, and it adds that level of grit to it, which I think since then Terminator's sort of become very sleek. And if you go back and you watch like the flash forward sequences to the future war in the first one, they're really dark, they're gritty. You feel like that this war has really taken its toll on the human race.
oh yeah,
Whereas
definitely.
now, and even the opening scene of Terminator 3, where it like shows you that again, I guess to jog people's memory of the franchise, it all looks very like sheen and sleek and modern. And I don't know if that's a factor just because of like the CGI focus came into it, because that's another big thing in this film is that many of the action scenes and things like that, what to do with the Terminator stuff, they're all done with computer graphics. Like there's a certain shot in it where Arnie emerges from the fire and he's got all like the robot face, but it's all really really bad CGI. And I think even in parts they use a full computer model of him, and you lose a lot of the sort of practical and makeup effects. You go back to like Terminator 2, the only thing that was CGI in that film was the T1000, and at the time that was a huge game changer for effects.
Yeah,
But it seemed like
and
around this time, this was when films were starting to use it a lot more, and I feel like on like every show I have like a big rant on CGI, but yeah, it does seem a lot more prominent in this film. And then obviously you look at Genesis now, and I'll be seeing that film tomorrow, but that looks like it's doing exactly the same thing.
yeah. I mean, I'll agree. I'll agree with you on the CGI front. I mean, I tend to think that the CGI back in the 90s kind of looks a bit better than it does now,
Mm, definitely.
because of the fact that it was a very limited technology. I had to do the very best with what they had at the time, and now it's just kind of progressed into just you can just do it. You can just do it on a laptop.
Mm. And it's
It,
it's all about that integration. Like if you blend CGI with mostly practical, then it will look better because
yeah,
your eye's still seeing a lot of real stuff. But we'll get more into the film now. So the plot takes place many years after the second one. John Connor's sort of on the run, although he keeps telling himself that they averted Judgment Day. There's part of him that still feels like he's being hunted and that he needs to change it. He's having nightmares of the future war still. Um, Later on in the film, Catherine Brewster runs into him, who's sort of an old flame of his when they were kids. Um, the Terminator is sent back again to protect them, and our threat in this one is a brand new Terminator called the TX, played by Kristanna Loken, who it's very difficult to pin down because they don't actually say it in the film. She seems a lot like the T-1000, but instead of just blades and knives, she can actually like summon guns and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
so from there, I guess we can go into the characters now. You've got Nick Stahl, who plays John Connor. I don't know what your opinion on it is. I think he's fine in the film, but he doesn't seem to inspire that great leader that's going to lead the resistance to a better future.
Oh no, he portrays himself as a whiny brat throughout the whole entire movie. Oh, my mum didn't love me. Oh, my mum, all she cared about was the stupid war that we stopped. And you know what? This film might as well not exist, right? Because what a way to completely diminish the idea and the ending to your second film,
Mm.
your masterpiece, by completely making schlock, junk, that is mass fed to an audience who doesn't care, right? And it is completely pointless. It is a pointless movie.
I'm
And his
I don't know if I'd go as far as say it's pointless. I do think, and I was going to get into this a bit later, but I may as well get into it now. The problem with this film, I would say most of all, is that like the first three quarters of it are more or less a remake of Terminator 2. It seems
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Terminator 2 did it best. We can't compete with that. Let's just try and replicate what that film did. Let's try and make it bigger and louder with more effects, more action. Um, and then for some bizarre reason, they thought they needed a hot Terminator for the villain.
I mean,
It was weird. I question a lot of the decisions in this film. Like going back to John Connor, I do think that he's okay in the film. I think he definitely has like glimmers of hope in his portrayal of John Connor, but for the most part, he's like a broken man. He's like stealing painkillers from the vets. He's very down and out. He's a drifter. Um, but
so he's essentially the character representation of his younger actor counterpart in the second film, who's a complete junkie.
yeah, see, you share the same opinion by the sounds of it as George did for Edward Furlong as John Connor. I thought he was brilliant in Terminator 2.
Yeah, so did I. Oh yeah, so did I.
Oh, okay.
I really did. I really did. I really did think he was absolutely brilliant.
Mm,
It's just his personal life didn't turn out so brilliant,
yeah.
and his career in acting just kind of.
Yeah, it's a shame because he was good, and if I don't know if you've seen American History X, he's in that as well, and he's equally as good in that film as well. It's a shame how he went, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nick Stoll, like the film starts off, and you see the flash forward again in the future war, and he's kind of standing on top of wreckage, but with all the humans at his back, and he's like lifting a gun into the air and shouting, and you're just not buying it. And it's, I know obviously they've got a recast, but when we see the John Connor from the future briefly at the very beginning of Terminator 2 before the opening sequence, you just look at him and you go, that's the guy who's going to lead the humans to a better end.
Yeah.
But here, yeah, he just doesn't seem to inspire much hope. And then obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger's comes back in this one. He's still the T-800, obviously a new model who's been sent back to protect John Connor and Catherine Brewster and ensure their safety. And through the T-800 in this film, we learn something that seems to completely ruin the end of Terminator 2, where we learn that Judgment Day is inevitable.
I mean, ugh, why? It was a perfect ending and a perfect self-contained ending, even though it had a complete time implosion
Yeah,
paradox thing at the end, which, if you stop to think about it, completely ruins the movie for you.
yeah,
Um,
and that seems to be what this one tries to rectify with this, because
yeah,
obviously the future needs to happen so that the Terminators can be sent back in the first place, so that the
and
course of the first two films can actually happen.
yeah, and so that Kyle Reese can go back in time to basically bone John's mum and produce him So that then you think, well, if they stopped Judgment Day, surely John wouldn't exist because Iris never went back in time to protect her in the first film, and it opens up a whole plot hole which they do try and rectify, but I don't think it works. And I think the sheer fact that it is inevitable kind of ruins certain character motivations and character sacrifices in the second film. I mean, you had the guy who practically selflessly sacrificed his life for the good of humanity.
Oh, Miles Dyson.
Yes,
Yeah.
Miles Dyson, and it was a noble sacrifice, and you could see that he was weighing up the decision that creating these machines and using the technology of the future to create these machines. He did think he was doing a good thing for humanity, but then he realizes through the course of the film that it's not as good as he thinks, and he sacrifices himself for the purpose of trying to stop his creations from, destroying the planet.
And then
and
with this film, that kind of just ruins that, doesn't it, a bit?
Yeah, you completely disregard that in this film.
Yeah,
and the noble sacrifice isn't there.
Yeah, and with the Terminator at the end of Terminator 2 as well, where they say, like, Judgment Day is over, and he goes, no, there's one more chip and it must be destroyed also. He doesn't say there, oh no, it's pointless doing this because Judgment Day is inevitable, so why bother?
Yeah, right.
I believe he says from the events in that movie, because they bring that up in the third one, because you've kind of got to it, he says you only postponed it. Which seems just a bit of a haphazard way of just, casting what had come before to the wayside. But with Arnie in this movie as well, as I said before, and this isn't his fault because this is just the script and the way they wanted to take it, it is a lot more sort of comedic and tongue-in-cheek. One thing I will say is that, and I mentioned this in our previous review, was Arnie's entrance in Terminator 2. Now, if you've just watched the first one and you go into the second one, you're not meant to be aware that at that point Arnold is a good guy. Like, you still think he could be a bad guy. It's not until he comes into contact with John Connor that you realise he's trying to save him. But you do get that scene where it's kind of cheesy, but I still enjoy it. It's where Bad to the Bone plays, and he comes down the stairs, he puts on the shade. So right from there, you can kind of see a different tone, because you wouldn't have got that in the first one at all. And with this third one, they almost replicate that same scene, but again, they try and make it more comedic. I believe that Arnold walks into a ladies' night in a bar, and he goes up to the male stripper at the front, who just happens to be wearing exactly the same kind of clothes that the Terminator wore in the second film.
Yeah.
Takes those, and they sort of do a homage to the whole sunglasses scene, but it's sort of tinted star sunglasses. And he takes them off and throws them aside and puts the regular shades on. And if you're a robot from the future, why would you do that? Like, we know as an audience member why they did that, because it's a callback to the other one. But I always thought from the other ones it was the fact that he puts on the shades in the first movie to disguise his robotic eye when he has to cut it out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Whereas in this one, it's just done for a sort of cheap gag, and then you've got the whole other one-liners in the film. You've got, like, talk to the hand, and they try and rehash I'll Be Back, where they kick the TX down a ventilation shaft. He kind of looks down back and says, like, she'll be back. And it's just... And they keep doing that. You watch the Genesis trailer now, and they're still doing the whole I'll be back thing. And at this point, it's been riffed in the Expendables films, loads of other things, and now it's just kind of cheesy.
I mean, it was one line
Yeah.
in one film, and it in the grand scheme of things, it didn't. I mean, the line didn't mean any. Well, in the context of that first film, it meant a lot. But I mean, it's not the whole basis around which you can parody and satire the hell out of that. And I just don't understand why they thought it would be clever to kind of completely reference it in this movie. I mean, Arnold kind of does the best with what he has, even though his best isn't very good. But the whole, I mean, why, in the context of the film, why would a robot from the future flick stupid-looking sunglasses and put them on his face? Why? And he walks in the first bar he walks into has a person with the exact same fitted clothes as he wants. This was a problem I had in the second film, the first film as well, where it's conveniently the first people he comes across just happen to have the same clothes he wants.
And one thing I'll say that's sort of good about Genesis is that they haven't put him back in the leather jacket and with the shades on, because you look at the first one and he was just dressed like a punk, wasn't he? Because they were the first people he came into contact with when he was sent back to Earth. And in the second one, it was sort of the same. He was in the middle of nowhere. He's sort of in a desert, and that bar was the one thing near him. Whereas you can kind of argue that for the third one, but it was just like they went, "Oh, that was so much of an iconic look of the Terminator from that second one again." And like the rest of the film, let's just try and replicate everything the second one did.
Yeah,
it doesn't stand on its own.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and that's kind of the problem this film has. In the long run, it is awesomely forgettable, right? I can't even remember it at all, and and I mean, I'm sure everyone else feels the same way about it. It is so forgettable. It is pointless. It is stupid. It has no meaning. It has no substance to it. And moving on to kind of the Catherine Brewster character.
Yeah.
All right. Dear God. Why?
Yeah.
Why? And my problem with her doesn't stem from the fact that she's a love interest, because I mean that's perfectly fine that she can be. But it's the sheer fact that she never got mentioned in any of the previous films at all. And so don't try and make her an old flame from his past if it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it's around the time that they keep talking about something like Mike Kripke's basement or something like that in the film. And I believe that was meant to take place somewhere around the same time as Terminator 2 did, and then a few days later she said he went missing. And some people have come up with some pretty fun theories about who her character is, and I don't know if you can remember from T2, it's when Robert Patrick T-1000's trying to find out where John's gone. And there's a little red-headed girl, and she says, I think he went to the Galleria. And loads of fans have tried to say, oh, that's Catherine Bruce, like a young Catherine Brewster.
No. That's all I have to say on that.
Yeah. It's. I mean, obviously, it's never said in the film, and obviously, it's clearly not what was intended to be. But yeah, her character really, she just serves a purpose because her father is really the one who initiates Skynet towards the end and launches the missiles. But yeah, she's sort of the damsel in distress for the whole film. She spends most of the time just screaming in the back of the truck when they're trying to take her to safety. She's always complaining, and it's not until the end really where she picks up a gun and she's actually doing something. She basically she's there to fly a plane. That's all she's there for.
I mean, talk about the film's gender politics all you want, but I mean, I thought we were 3 years into the 21st century, and you're still using the whole damsel in distress thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. It works if your female lead is a strong character. She isn't a strong character, and her future self doesn't, like, they're two completely different people. Two completely different people. Two completely different characters.
And I don't think Claire Danes or Nick Stahl have much chemistry in this film, although they try to towards the end. The last shot of the movie seems very much like, oh, okay, I guess we better hook up because there's no one left now.
It is the same sort of romantic chemistry that Orlando Bland and Keira Knightley had in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Wet and completely wooden, and also it is almost it actually it is a better romantic sort of story than they had in the Transformers movies between Megan Fox
Yeah.
and stupid Shia LaBeouf, Sam Witwicky.
Do it. I love that new meme from him, by the way.
I mean,
Um,
you can't get any worse than that as chemistry goes.
no, and it's a shame because I mean you look back to Terminator 1 and Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton in that film. You really genuinely buy their relationship by the end that they've fallen in love, even though they've only been together for a very short while.
Yeah,
And they could have done exactly the same thing in Terminator 3, where obviously Michael Biehn could have been a parallel with John Connor from this film, where they're the only ones who are aware of what's going to happen in the future. And when they first meet the female love interest, they're completely oblivious to what's going on, and they learn about it throughout the course of the film. And that's kind of what happens, but you genuinely believe that um, Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor are in love, and you just don't get that in this film, which is a
no.
shame because that's a big part of this film is that they're the he's the leader of the resistance, obviously, and that ends up being his wife and the mother of his children, and you just don't get that impression by the end of the film.
I completely agree with that. Their chemistry just is
Mm.
non-existent.
And then you were talking about sort of the gender politics and stuff, and we get on to our main bad guy in this film, which is the
Oh,
TX, played by Kristana Loken. And like every scene she's on screen, they just try and play up the fact that she's very attractive.
yeah.
Like
I
the
mean,
opening scene, like you look at the T1000. What happens when he first lands? He goes up to that guy. I think he's a cop or something. Kills him. And then, obviously, throughout the film, he's a massive threat. Whereas the first thing she does in this film is she makes her boobs bigger.
you hooked me. I mean, you have hooked me, right?
Yeah.
I I don't care. My view on sexism is very prominent, and it is something that should kind of be
Hmm.
quashed. However, you've hooked me. I'm a man, and there are certain stimuli that will affect me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just Terminator trope now that when the Terminator's sent back, they're fully naked. We obviously
Yep.
get that. Obviously, as well, that say a PG-13, so they have to skirt around that as much as they can. And what bothers me as well is that I'm totally fine with you having a female bad guy Terminator sent back. That's fine,
Yeah,
but it's
I mean, they can be scary.
yeah.
You can have a scary female villain.
Yeah, and but the fact is that they just never go in that direction with her. I mean, the bit where you should be scared of her, where she kills the person in the car to kind of get the red leather jumpsuit thing in the car, that happens off screen. There's like a quick cut and you don't see it. So all like tension's taken away and you don't believe that she's a threat.
Yeah, and that is the same thing, the same sort of problem I had with Voldemort in the
Mm,
last Harry Potter film.
yeah.
There is no menace. He is the main villain. She is the main villain of the piece. But there just doesn't seem to be any real tension to it. It's just kind of going through the motions of doing villainy stuff and being the bad guy. It's just kind of very repetitive. Like she finds them, they have a fight, they have a big crane chase
Hmm.
and big stupid awful action scene.
I mean, she tries to be. They try to make her like the T1000 as much as they can. The very sort of stern-faced, the very robotic walk to them. Um, and obviously, I said earlier about the whole liquid metal thing. That's not really played up all that much. Although when she turns into a robot, her skin kind of melts away, very much like the liquid metal thing. But she sort of has guns and flamethrowers in this one, and yeah, it's just it's trying to go bigger and badder than the one in the second one. But I'm sorry, but Robert Patrick in that film, I would say, is one of the most iconic movie bad guys out there.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the, you can't beat Robert Patrick, or you can't beat Robert Patrick's
Mm,
villain character, or say character, his Terminator.
mm. And I
And
said this in that one as well, just quickly. And he's not a big guy either. Robert Patrick. Like you look at the first one, and Arnie's sort of physically imposing, but the whole point of the T1000 is that he's meant to blend in like anyone else. So he just looks like a regular guy, but you just take one look at him and he's scary as hell. Whereas in this one,
yeah,
you could play it up the same angle where she just looks like anyone. Um, but there's just it's difficult to pinpoint why there's just no tension with it. And when she is fighting the Terminator later on in the film, they still do some stupid stuff with it, like the whole bit where she sort of grabs his crotch and picks him up and like pushes him through toilet stalls and into urinals and stuff like that, and it's just completely ridiculous.
the whole film is a ridiculous mess, uh, laced together with some stupid half-hearted plot, with some awful characters in it, and the fact that this this new Terminator, kind of, you mentioned the name before, but it's so forgettable.
Terminator Genesis.
No, the
Oh, the
term,
title for
like
this one, Rise
the
of the
the female
Oh,
machine,
TX.
TX,
Yeah.
right, T10, Jason X. Um, she hasn't got anything to do really, apart from just go around and causing loads of mayhem. And the fact that they try and make her too Robert Patrick,
Mm,
too much like Robert Patrick, kind of diminishes what they could have done with her. They could have made her sort of like not a very menacing, well, not have a very menacing presence, but maybe she could have been a thinker, been trying to outsmart them,
mm.
trying to gain their trust before trying to kill them. And you could have done so much more with it, instead of having trying to be the physical presence. She could have tried to have outsmarted them with wit, or with super intelligence or something.
Mm. The
But
only thing
instead,
they
no.
really try is that they do go a new angle in that she can control machines with nanobots, I think. Like she can kind of corrupt. She corrupts a few cars in the car chase towards the start, and then obviously later on in the film, she rewires Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator to attack John Connor. But that's about it. I think they could have gone quite all out with that one and had to like not bring in machines to life, but she could have done that to try and meet her ends by bringing other machines to life and attacking them,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah. She could have done, and I mean, she could have easily have done that after trying really hard to be smart, but
Mm,
that fails, and then that backfires, and then she has to use this machine controlling thing, gizmo thing,
mm.
or whatever she has attached to her body, apart from, like, just going off on a bit of a tangent.
Okay, I like tangents.
What sort of designer for a machine, or what sort of, because I mean the machines make the machines,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So what machine thought sat around in a board meeting and went, you know what, we should add to the new Terminator to try and go and kill John Connor. We should add a device that makes her boobs bigger,
Yeah.
because that that right there is gonna kick ass. It's gonna completely. He's gonna just be mesmerized by this boob enlargement machine.
It's just completely ridiculous, and it's yeah. The one thing we do see though is it's a deleted scene from Terminator 3. It's a hilarious deleted scene. It's a flashback to how they created the Arnold Schwarzenegger robot. I don't know if you've seen it. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's an army general is like something like Provost Sergeant William Candy or something, and he speaks in a really broad Southern drawl. And
Yeah,
it's Arnold Schwarzenegger obviously having to mouth the words, and they dubbed it in afterwards. And they're saying that because he's like the peak physical fitness, they're going to take his likeness and use that as the model for their T800 line. And when they say that they're not keen on the voice, one of the people in the boardroom turns around and says, "We can fix it," in a strong Austrian Arnold accent. So they say that they'll use that voice instead. And so maybe she was like part of the same boardroom meeting. But even so, your argument still stands. What sexist pig around this boardroom table would want that as a feature on the TX? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and
But there's just one other character I want to bring up with now as well, or lack of, I should say. Sarah Connor. Now, halfway through this film, we learn that shortly after the events of Terminator 2, she died of leukemia. And it seems a bit of an awkward way to get her out the series. Like, I think, obviously, maybe Linda Hamilton didn't want to come back for this. But I think you do really miss her presence in this film,
yeah,
especially because she was the main character in the first two.
yeah, she did. She did completely elevate those the first two films, and she was probably my favourite character out of the
Mm,
whole lot. And what you could have had in this one is the same sort of mother son dynamic you had in the previous film, although it probably could have kind of would have been treading the same water, but it
mm.
still would have worked, and you could have had the not so much the resentment, but more acceptance and more kind of they're both working together now. They're both kind of believe the same stuff. They have the same philosophies.
Yeah, you could have had that respect for them, and I think maybe if you did bring Sarah Connor in, I think you could have probably have maybe killed her off halfway through the film because then that would have been like, look, John, you're on your own now.
Yeah.
And
Oh
then that
yeah.
would have been a really good setup for his character development and arc for the third act of the film. But as such, we kind of just learn everything between the two films through like a 5 minute exposition dump. But other than that, really, I guess we can kind of wrap up our talk on Terminator 3 now. Are there any positives you could give to the movie? Because one thing I will say is that we've come down pretty hard on this film, but I will say that I still very much enjoy watching this movie. I think it's still, if you can take, if you can distance it enough away from the first two and just kind of see it as its own thing, it's just a fun action movie with the Terminator name on it. But
Yeah.
I do think this film does some things well. I do like really the ending when it starts to come into its own and try something new, like the whole bit where they get to the airfield and the bit where the T-800 is corrupted and attacks John. I think that bit's actually brilliant, and I really like that John Connor's sort of the one having to talk him down, and we get a glimpse at what the machines are actually capable of. And I will say that the last scene of the movie is quite genuinely moving. I mean, the soundtrack for that bit alone really comes into its own. I think the track on the soundtrack is called Radio, um, and it's where John and Catherine realise what's about to happen, what the T-800's actual mission was, and then we go into sort of from space and we can see all the missiles being fired across Earth, and it looks strangely beautiful actually from space, but when you kind of think about the destruction, obviously it's cataclysmic. And then
Yeah.
the final shot of the movie is going under the water to the ashen floor, and you just get a Terminator skull, and the light from the eye fades from red to dead. And I think that is a brilliant ending for the film. But again, how it sets up, and we'll get into Salvation in a minute, but the ending's very similar to that. It's like we know that the future war's about to come, so was there really any point of this film? And I think that's, if I'm going to ask the question, does it still hold up? I think it holds up fine as an action movie, but if you're looking at it from sort of the Terminator lore and the continuation of the story, I think it is a bit of a slap in the face to 2 and what the whole ending of 2 tried to achieve. Um, but as a film on its own, I think it's still very watchable. But obviously, and this goes for all the Terminator films that have come out after this, it's just not a patch on the original 2.
Oh no, definitely not. I would agree that for however much I did kind of like hate on this movie a bit. I mean, I didn't go into really massive detail about
Mm.
what I hated, I still kind of like it in a weird sort of sadistic way. I hate watching it, but I love watching it at the same time because it is kind of cheesy. It's kind of, just schlock, and you can have fun with it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's it, but it is just a bad film. It is a bad Terminator movie
Mm.
as well.
I mean, this just makes me feel really old now, but I was 10 years old when this movie came out.
10 years old.
So,
Jeez.
I still remember seeing it at the cinema. Jesus, has it been that long? But to me, this film is a lot like Jurassic Park 3, because I seem to be the only person in existence that quite enjoys Jurassic Park 3. Obviously, not as good as the original, but if you just kind of watch it for its own thing, it's a good just action movie that you can just kind of sit back, turn the brain off, and enjoy. But if you are going at it from a complete hardcore Terminator fan, then you will obviously. I see all the problems in it. I acknowledge everything everyone else does, but I think there is a little bit to this film that is good. Like I just said, like the ending and a few of the ideas they tried to do towards the end. But a lot of it was obviously lost in translation, and the tone was a big problem.
Yeah.
And then moving on from that, 6 years later, we obviously get Terminator Salvation, directed by McG, which is which
McGee.
is one of the best names for a director ever. Um, yeah, so getting into this, obviously the entire main cast has been recast. This is set entirely in the future war, but I think it's a few years before the war we see from the original Terminator and, well, in all the Terminators before this, really. Um, so really, this one abandons the structure of the previous ones. The other ones have always been, a Terminator sent back from the future to either kill or protect someone from the past. Whereas this one, it's a war movie. Like, you've got the Resistance trying to fight against the machines, but the look of the war isn't quite what I think all fans are expecting. Like, on paper, this is what we've always wanted to see. We've always wanted to see a movie set in the future war, see what it's all about. But looking at it, it's very sort of like deserty and sands, and it doesn't have the same grit to it like the originals had the laser weapons, the skull covered grounds. It was always night, and it felt like a proper futuristic war. Whereas this one just feels like any generic war.
Yeah. Oh, I'd have to agree with that. And the problem is that because you wanted to see that so badly, doesn't make the actual. The reason why it worked was because it was so short, it was so condensed in the other films that you were wondering what could happen. But
Yeah.
when you see it, it is not the same. It is not how you expect, and that's kind of the issue I take with it, and the
Mm.
fact that the setting is all wrong, 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 wrong.
And I think we can go into the plot a bit. And really, this is where the current trend of the Terminator trailers spoiling the entire movie comes in, because the entire film for me was spoilt with the trailer of this film. Um, so the plot of this, it's as I said, it takes place in the future war. But really, the main focus isn't John Connor in this one. It's a brand new character made for this film called Marcus Wright, played by Sam Worthington, and he's the sort of character you go through the whole movie with. He starts off the start of the movie is he's on death row, and Helena Bonham Carter comes in. I don't know her name, so I'm just going to call her Helena Bonham Carter. She comes in with a form that his body will go to science once he's killed. So he signs this away, and then throughout the course of the film later on, and this is a spoiler in case you haven't seen the movie, but then again, it also was in the trailer, it's revealed that he was made into a Terminator. And he discovers this about halfway through the film. And really, the rest of the plot is a, sort of again like the Terminators want to kill Kyle Reese while he's there, because if you kill Kyle Reese, you kill John Connor. And then I think it's through later on in the film that they discover that, this soldier is John Connor. But and we'll get into the characters now. So we'll have Christian Bale as John Connor. Again, sort of like with Nick Stahl from Terminator 3, you really don't get that leadership quality from him. I think this film was originally intended to be the first part in a trilogy, and I think maybe we would have got a lot more development with this as it went on. But I mean, John Connor's meant to be the voice that inspires courage and hope towards the whole human race, whereas in this film it's just sort of Christian Bale still doing his Batman voice.
Yeah, yeah, he is just recapping the Batman thing. However, you know, I'm a huge Christian Bale fan. I
Mm,
absolutely think he is a fantastic actor. However, he is just reining it in for the paper.
yeah.
He knows it's a bad movie, and he knows he is bad in it. To coin the sentence used by Mark Kermode on the film,
Mm.
he knows he's bad in it.
Yeah, and I think a big problem is, and you hear this in behind the scenes stuff, I don't believe the script was fully written or pinned down of the direction they wanted to take it. So I know that Christian Bale was sort of having to have meetings with the director and the writers and try and help guide where the film goes. And then we see his obviously his famous rant on set from this film. I know you're a bigger Christian Bale fan than me. I don't mind him as an actor, but I think when you see moments like this with his rant on set, I think I can imagine him being like that in real life. So I don't really like him in that respect. There are some films where I think he's great in, like American Psycho. It's like one of my favorite films, probably in my like top 20, and he's great in that movie. But then you get stuff like Batman, and he's never been my favorite Batman. But I know before we started recording, you were saying that you've got an argument to defend that rant of his, so
Yes,
I'm interested to hear that.
yes, I do. I mean, I didn't know that the whole production thing was kind of skewed, and
Mm,
the script wasn't finished, and that he potentially had to help along with that. When you get your actors in to help with the script, you're going to have a bad movie
mm,
because they're not paid to write and they're not paid to direct. But and I think the frustration kind of comes through in his rant as well. I mean,
yeah.
you're not as an the whole set, and being an extra on on a TV show myself, um, a 1 day shoot for something.
Mm,
Um, I found that the whole entire set is just when the cameras roll, that's it. It's the actors.
mm,
No, none of the crew move about or do anything, tinker with anything. That should all be done prior to action. And when you can see somebody moving around and fiddling with lights, when you're trying to get into character, into the zone, it's going to distract you, and you're gonna. And I would never want that to happen.
mm.
And
But you say like get into character and get into the zone, but really, I think he's just bad in this movie. Like
oh
he's just
yeah,
so one note. He's so grim, and there's just no humanity to him at all. Even though he's meant to be the leader of the people who instills it,
oh yeah,
there's just it's just nothing. He's just a cardboard cutout with a grisly voice, and that's it. That's all you get from him this whole movie.
oh yeah, I agree. But that doesn't mean he's not trying to do the best with what he has
Mm,
and trying to rein it in at the same time. I mean, the guy loves his craft. The guy loves to act, and and I mean, he's the crew member obviously isn't a very professional guy,
mm,
because if he knew anything, he'd have the lights would have been already sorted, would have been already everything would have been in place for the scene. This kind of where McG comes in as a very very bad director,
mm.
and kind of not treat. I mean, he sort of when he was going absolutely mad, he was kind of like trying, not really trying to kind of settle him down. You know, that scene in Tropic Thunder where Len Oh, well, Tom Cruise's
Is
character
it
in it.
Grossman?
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
He says, the way you treat actors, just pull their pants down and just smack their ass. That's it. You spank their ass. That's kind of, he didn't do that, and
Yeah.
he got away with it. McGee just kind of crawled up in a little ball and just went, ooh,
But you know, with Mick G, his past, he'd done before this film, he'd done Charlie's Angels
oh,
Full Throttle, We Are Marshall, which I've never heard of, and but his past really comes from music videos,
yeah,
which is sort of a comparison you can bring to Michael Bay, like with his history and the big, loud, sort of dumb action movies like the Transformers films, for example.
oh yeah,
Um, it's interesting. Like, I'm not saying this film is anywhere near as bad as Transformers, but I think when you've got a director from that background, perhaps not all the time, but I think maybe they're used to a different sort of. They're surrounded by different people, and obviously being on a movie set is completely different to a music video shoot.
oh yeah. I think it tries to be as bad as Transformers.
Mm.
It really does. It wants to be Transformers. It wants to have the giant robots fighting, and the giant robots walking around,
Which we
and
do get later on in the film.
yeah,
We get
we
like
do.
a glimpse of a new Terminator, this huge multi-story sized bipedal one that releases motorcycle Terminators out of it, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it does lead for a pretty decent chase, I think, in the film.
Yeah. I mean, the McGee's direction is kind of frenetic.
Mm,
It's kind of exactly the same as Michael Bay. It's a frenetic mess, and I don't particularly know where any of the geography is
mm.
for any of the scenes. Who's doing what? What's going on where? And that was my confusion throughout the whole film was okay. So they're here. Where is it? What's its purpose? Why is it here? Why are they going to it? I just didn't get anything of that
Mm. And
at
some of
all.
the other characters in the film, you've got Bryce Dallas Howard, who takes over from Claire Danes,
Yeah,
playing Catherine Brewster, and
yeah,
really, there's not much point in bringing her up because she
no.
does really nothing in the entire film.
And she appears younger
Yeah,
than her 2003 counterpart.
yeah, and you know, she's pregnant in this film, but obviously the film never led to any other sequels, so we never see the whole son or daughter of John Connor be born, which was hinted at in Terminator 3. And, you know, I'm kind of a little bit upset that we didn't get to see the rest of this trilogy play out, because I think it could have gone places and it could have obviously covered all the ground that was hinted at in the previous ones. But as such, situations turned out we've got Terminator Genesis instead, for better or for worse, probably for worse. Other characters we've got in it are Anton Yelchin playing a young Kyle Reese. Now, I actually think that he is probably the strongest thing in this movie.
Sorry, who plays who?
A young Kyle
Oh
Reese.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I gotcha.
He sort of tags along with a mute girl in it for some reason. Not quite
Yeah,
sure what the point of including her character was. But no, I think he really tries to capture the mannerisms of Michael Biehn, and I think he does that really well. I've only ever seen him in this, and obviously the new Star Trek films. He's brilliant in that as well. Um, yeah, and this is like another example. I'd have loved to have seen this character grow, and if they ever did sequels to it, and see him be obviously sent back and all that stuff that Genesis seems to be covering now. Um, so yeah, I will completely give credit to him. I think he was brilliant in it, and the material he was given, he does really well. They do a neat little setup in this film with Sam Worthington's character, where Sam Worthington is the one to teach him how to do the whole sawn-off shotgun thing and tie it to his arm so no one could snatch it away, which plays into the opening of Terminator 1.
yeah.
So there's little moments like that, and I do actually think that some of the references in this film are pretty good. There's a lot that are on the nose, like later on in the film where Christian Bale very sort of ham-handedly does the "I'll be back" line. Like that didn't need to be in the film.
Oh no.
But you do get some pretty good moments, like we get to see where he gets the scars on his face from. Um, Obviously, the bit I just said with the shotgun, and then there's a pretty neat callback to the second one where uh, John Connor lures the motorbike Terminators out with the "You Could Be Mine" song by Guns N' Roses, which was used quite a lot in Terminator 2. So there's little references like that that I like. They're not completely on the nose.
No, they're not, and I think that's a good point
Mm.
in the movie's favour. However, I would like to raise something regarding Kyle Reese, and I mean, I know the actor playing him is very good. He does a good job in the role with what he has. However, this is my problem, and it stems from a similar problem of a time paradox plot thing that was kind of in the second one.
Yeah.
Right. This is supposed to be set before John Connor becomes the massive leader that he is.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how do any of the machines in the future at that point in time know who the hell Kyle Reese is?
And now I remember we used to argue this point quite a lot at uni, so I'm going to try and argue it now because that's already happened. That's in history. That's from the 80s. They know that Kyle Reese is a threat
But
because he is the father of John Connor.
but how? I don't understand how that could even, without any form of history, because the Terminators in Terminator 3 just, or the machines there just kind of fly around and shoot anything. So how do they specifically know? Because the chips and everything are gone from all the previous Terminators sent back. How do they specifically know that when Skynet's launched, that okay, we just got to kill Kyle Reese? That's it.
Well, the chips
How?
and stuff were only for sort of the blueprints for the creation of the Terminators, I thought. So the whole history with Kyle Reese would still be intact, surely.
I, I, it,
It's weird because it would have to be a time loop, obviously, of this constantly keep happening so that obviously he could be sent back to get there and all that stuff. I don't think this is a film that strikes me that they don't want you to try and pick up on those things. And I mean, already at this point, even with just the first two Terminator films alone, if you look at them as their own thing, they're still full of all inconsistencies with the whole time travel thing. And that's a very common occurrence if you're doing a
Yeah,
time travel thing to get it all
it,
making sense.
you only had 2 movies of that,
Mm.
whereas now you have about 4, and you're trying to keep track of everything, and it just gets confusing. It really does, and it just kind of everything just kind of goes implodes on itself.
And Genesis looks like it's going to make it even more confusing
Oh
now
yeah.
because we've got a whole parallel sort of Star Trek reboot timeline going on now as well.
Oh god. I mean,
I'm really not looking forward to seeing that movie tomorrow, I'm going to be honest. We've kind of played this up on the channel for quite a while, that we always keep hating on and bringing up Terminator Genesis and how much we're really going to hate that movie, but I don't like hating on a film before I go and see
yeah.
it. Even if I've got problems with the trailers and stuff, I always try and distance myself as much as I can when I sit down to watch it, but I'm going to have a really, really hard time with Genesis tomorrow.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh my god. I mean, I think I may skip it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, going back to Salvation, the big main character of the film, really, and I touched on this earlier, is Sam Worthington's character of Marcus. And, you know, this came out around the time where it seems studios were really trying to push Sam Worthington as the next big actor. I mean, 2009, he also had Avatar, which was his big, big movie. And then I think the following year we had Clash of the Titans, which is a terrible, terrible movie.
yeah,
And then since then he's just kind of died off. I mean, he may make a resurgence when they bring out Avatar 2, 3 and 4, I guess. But, I mean, after this film and Clash of the Titans, he just kind of went away and he hasn't done many projects since. I actually don't mind him in this film, and I don't mind the character of Marcus himself. I think he's a pretty good character, and I like what they do with him. That obviously at the end he sacrifices himself to save John Connor, and it's sort of like it's not as good. Don't get me wrong, but it's similar to the ending of T2, where it's that a machine can sacrifice itself for the good of humanity. So you kind of get that theme going on with it. My only problem with it is that Marcus ultimately plays no main role in the previous history of Terminator. So you're kind of watching it, you know he's going to die at the end because he's not in the other ones. So again, I would say even more so than Terminator 3, it's sort of a pointless movie in that you
Yeah,
follow this protagonist the whole way through the film who's completely worthless in the grand scheme of the history. I mean, it could have focused on John Connor and we could have really delved a lot more into his character and see his journey and see him grow from sort of a lowly soldier to the leader of the resistance. But as such, the story just kind of focuses on Sam Worthington and then John Connor's sort of in the background.
yeah, and I mean, I kind of understand what they're trying to do with the character.
Mm.
They're trying to give a more human element to the movie. Where I mean, I think it's a bit too on the nose,
Yeah.
but they're trying to recreate this dynamic from the second film about the Terminator being growing into a person. But I do think it's so on the nose with him actually being a person to start with.
Mm.
But yeah, Sam worthless.
I like
He
it.
he may as well just not be in the film. It's the same problem. This film may as well just not exist.
Mm.
It serves no purpose. It doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't it doesn't give us any more insight into any of the characters, and any of the characters we already know. It just throws references at us. It throws stupid CGI Arnold at us.
Mm. Oh, actually, that's a good point. I'd like to talk about that. I remember seeing that in the film, and I did kind of lose my mind in the cinema when he walks out. I was glad that they had some kind of inclusion with him. Um, and at the time, I remember the CGI absolutely blowing me away. Like, I'd never seen this in a film before, replicating a younger version of someone, and it's the Terminator how he looks in the first film, like the
Yeah,
80s Arnold. And I remember it looking great. I've watched it back since, and it is very noticeably CGI now.
yeah,
But I still do think it kind of holds up, and obviously you get this happen in many other films as well. You get the Tron Legacy film with
oh
Jeff Bridges,
god,
which I
that
still
looked
thought was sort of
awful.
okay, although I know a lot of people thought the CGI was terrible in that film.
That really what that CGI was terrible,
Mm.
really bad, and that Jeff Bridges' face and that opening scene of that movie, it is kind of exactly the same thing as this Terminator,
Mm.
this Terminator Salvation movie with Arnie. It does exactly the same thing. It's just like it looks so fake. It looks
Mm.
fake.
But I will give the film credit in that it. I think it's. I know a lot of people complained about it, but I think the film still did well on its own without Arnold being the main character of the film. I mean, I think it's a nice little sort of nod, and all he serves is like a big boss fight, really, at the end of the
Yeah,
film for the final act. I mean, he appears as Arnold, and then they probably run out of CGI budget, and he's quickly sort of the skin's melted away, and it's just a metal skeleton. But then again, sort of another criticism I had with T3 was that it sort of remade T2 a lot for the movie. The entire last bit of this film in the factory with the T800 robot is more or less a remake of the original. And again, the original, you had your practical exoskeleton of the T800, and in this, it's replaced with a CGI model. And they're sort of throwing everything at this thing. Like, there's a point where John Connor shoots up at something, and like all lava pulls out of it. and
Yeah,
completely covers the T800, and you're like, well, this is what killed the
yeah.
T1000.
That we've already
Why isn't this
established it.
killing the T800? Exactly, yeah.
We've already established that the fact that in the second film he dips himself in lava and sacrifices himself, and that kills him. So
Yeah.
why is he now like completely indestructible to
Yeah, and
absurd levels?
they just wanted to go bigger, louder, and more threatening, I guess, than the original. But the thing is, where they go so over the top that it detracts from the threat. I mean, the end climax of T1 is still really tense. I mean, they blow it up, and it's still crawling like the top half of it. And even though it's sort of this puppet just crawling through this thing, you really get the sense that this thing isn't stopping. Whereas modern movies, they want to go so over the top. We have lava, we have him then instantly freezing it, and stuff like
Yeah,
that, and it just gets too. They try and do too much stuff with it that it detracts from it.
it's dumb.
Yeah,
It really is.
and really, they're all your main characters. I mean, you've got some other side characters. You've got Moon Bloodgood, who plays Blair Williams, who she's an alright character, but she doesn't really have all that much to do with the film. She has like nothing to do for the final act of the film. And then you have Helena Bonham Carter, who was a really bizarre choice for this film because she doesn't really seem like the kind of person to be in a Terminator film. I think I may be wrong with this, but I think that her husband, no, she wasn't married, was she? At the time, she was going out with Tim Burton, and I think he was a huge Terminator fan. So he was the one who kind of persuaded her to be in this film. She's not in the film much, but she does sort of serve as the face of Skynet, which I think takes away from the mystique of Skynet
Yeah,
because it was very much sort of a faceless organization.
yeah. But why? And also in the I keep saying this, but in the context of the film,
Hmm.
right? Why did they use some secretary woman who gives Sam Worthington the bits of paper saying your body's going to be in science?
Hmm.
Why did they use her? I mean, I know why they used her because it's Helena Bonham Carter. You're not going to use her. But in the context of the film, why that specific person? Why not
Hmm.
someone who was more of a board member of Skynet? Or why not anyone else besides
Hmm.
some secretary?
Yeah, it's a really random choice, and as I say, I think it kind of, to me, I don't know if you've seen it. It reminds me a lot of the ending of iRobot with Will Smith,
Ugh,
with the sort of Vicky artificial intelligence. It reminds me a lot of that, and I think obviously when they get into the Skynet headquarters, it's very sort of Starship Enterprise. It's very sleek and white and sort of LED glass screens everywhere, and
yeah,
that's not really what I imagine Skynet to be like. It's just sort of there. It's like an artificial intelligence that can move between machines and this big organization. I didn't. It looks. Tell you what it looks like. It looks a lot like Kamino from Star Wars:
yeah.
Attack of the Clones.
Oh yeah, mm, yeah.
I'll raise the specter of the prequels of this movie. But oh yeah, one other character who we need to mention: Michael Ironside.
Oh my god! I mean, he just can't do He just can't do anything wrong. He's given.
His character is massively stupid in this film.
Oh yeah, but he plays that. He plays it up so well. I
Yeah,
love love him in this film.
yeah, we love Michael Ironside. He's just great. He's just got one of the most iconic voices, I would say, as well. I know a lot of people don't like him, but well, or I don't like him, but are aware of him all that much.
Yeah,
But
I
he's
mean,
he's always good fun in anything he's in.
he's just he's his character is so dumb. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
dumb beyond belief.
Dooms the entire human race and lures all the Terminators to him, just because he's too proud to listen to anyone else who says that it's a dumb idea.
I'm sure.
It's stupid.
I'm sure he knows it's dumb,
Yeah, yeah.
but he
He's just
just
doing it
think.
for the paycheck. Probably like everyone in this movie was, to be honest.
No, but I mean, his character probably thinks this is a dumb idea, but this
Mm.
guy is telling me is getting in my face, so I'm gonna prove him wrong. I'm gonna be the one that saves the human race.
Oh, I wish he was Michael Ironside, leader of the Resistance. He's more inspiring than Christian Bale in this movie. I mean, Michael Ironside in this movie is sort of like with a bunch of other dudes just sort of stuck in a submarine the whole movie.
Just that they
And I was saying this before we started recording, but there's a moment where Christian Bale needs to go to headquarters, which is the submarine, and he just sort of jumps out of this helicopter into what looks like a massive raging ocean, and then literally the next cut is he's on board the submarine, dripping water, sitting in a chair. I'm like, how the hell did he get into this submarine? Because clearly it can't surface because it would be detected.
yeah.
So he would have had to have swam down miles and miles of ocean to get to this submarine, and then somehow open the hatch and get in without flooding the entire submarine. It's absolutely stupid.
Unless it's kind of the Gungan city where it's
Oh god.
kind of almost to the surface, and
Yeah.
it's so bright you can just see it from orbit. I mean, yeah, it's what I'm actually speechless. But one thing I was going to say was that all Michael Ironside seems to do in this film is shout,
Oh yeah.
and shouts a lot, and
And then
shouts
Christian
very
Bale
well.
shouting back at him, and then Michael Ironside raises volume and tries to shout over him as well. It's great.
It's just too. Although one you can understand quite well, and the other is Christian Bale doing Batman.
Yeah. He's still doing his Batman voice in this movie. It's like, oh. But yeah, Michael Ironside, we probably talked about Michael Ironside more than like Kyle Reese or anyone like that, but it's Michael Ironside. We need to give him the recognition.
For being such a dumb character.
Yeah.
He is my favourite character because he's so dumb.
Yeah, it's like we're gonna have a load of Star Wars prequel references in this one. It's like Newt Gunray from the Star Wars prequels. He's so lovably idiotic and stupid that you just kind of like the guy.
Oh yeah. Oh.
But anyway, Star Wars talk is another podcast for another time. Just a few points left to make, really, on Salvation. I think we've mostly said everything, to be honest. One thing I did want to bring up was the original ending of the film. It's been said that the original ending was going to be that when Marcus tells John to go to Skynet and whereabouts to find what he's looking for, John was going to walk into a room and he was just going to be completely surrounded by loads of Terminators. And they were all just going to gun him down, kill him, and then at the end, one of them takes his likeness, and that was where the film was going to end. Now, I do think that ending's completely dumb, and it would kind of betray everything about John Connor being the leader of the Resistance. But it's sort of interesting that was the idea that they had and didn't go with.
Yeah.
And Terminator Genesis has sort of ran with the whole idea of John Connor now being a Terminator. I don't know what the context of that is. Obviously, I haven't seen the movie. I'll see it tomorrow, so I'll see how that factors into the story. But again, another reason why I'm not looking forward to Genesis, it took what they ruled out to be a crap idea, and they've made a whole movie about it.
Yeah. But that's the problem. You spoke earlier about the trailer stuff. And I mean, the surprise is gone now because you know he's a Terminator.
Yeah, and you know a lot of modern films are doing it now. It's that fine line. Like, gone are the days of the really awesomely creative teaser trailers. Like, I think the original trailer for Jurassic Park, for example, didn't show any dinosaurs. Now it just seems to. I mean, and how many trailers get released as well? Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a good example of this. They released about 5 or 6 trailers.
Oh, yeah.
To the point where you basically knew the whole movie before you went to see it.
Yeah.
And it's that fine line. You want to show off the movie, yes, but you don't want to show a whole abridged version of the film you're about to see. You want them surprises. Like, if I didn't know that John Connor was a Terminator, now I'm not saying that's a good idea. I would probably have exactly the same reaction as I do now. But, you know, at least it's something. And going back to Salvation, I think that if I hadn't have known that Marcus was a Terminator, I think it would have still been pretty clear that he was. But when the characters act shocked when they find out, I think the audience would have shared that somewhat. And it's just lessened. So the only shock value you have in this movie is that one moment, and you already know it if you've seen the trailer.
Yeah, completely agree.
And from there, I just want to hit a few other little points. The score for this film was done by Danny Elfman, and it's weird because I do like the soundtrack to this film and the new theme that he comes up with for the movie. I think it's a really good theme and it fits well into Terminator. But we only get like one play of the drums at the opening. The dun 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 dun. We only get that once, and we never sadly get the main theme of the film. And the main theme was used in Terminator 3. Unfortunately, we didn't get it here. I'm hoping that it's used somewhere in Genesis, but to be honest, it seems like when you get sequels like this now, they never use any of the same old
No.
themes, which is a shame.
I mean, I think the soundtrack kind of was a bit bland
Mm.
in places, and I didn't really find it as memorable as many of the other themes in the previous films. I mean, the main theme to the film is fine. It's okay, but I just find the soundtrack is a bit too bland. There's nothing
Yeah.
really that stands out about it.
And you know, a good soundtrack can heighten slightly a bad movie. Like, you look to the Transformers films, for example, and the soundtracks to those films are absolutely fantastic. You really deserve to be in a much better series of films than those.
Yeah,
As I say, I don't think the music's bad to this film. It is slightly forgettable, and it just would have been nice to have heard the original Terminator theme. But I guess, again, we'll sort of end it with any positives you have with the movie, or if you don't have any, the major problems you think it has, and then finally, would you recommend it?
Michael Ironside.
Yeah, of course.
I think it is just kind of forgettable,
Mm.
and much like the same as Terminator 3, I just can't enjoy it. Like,
Which would you say is better? Would you say that this is better than Terminator 3, or?
I mean, in terms of, I mean, it looks the same as every other desert future setting we've seen already. There's
Mm.
nothing new about it. But yeah, I think 3 is better, much
Yeah.
better, way better.
See, with me, where I stand on this, some of the positives, I really liked that they bought the whole Sarah Connor tapes that she left to John, which we see her recording at the end of the first film. I thought that was a nice inclusion, and you still have John Connor listening to his mother for guidance,
Yeah,
which we didn't get in Terminator 3, and I think this was a nice way of sort of tying it back to that. Um, I still, I actually kind of like Salvation. As I say, it's nowhere near as good as the first two, but I don't think it intended to be. It is just a war movie, an action movie. There are a few plot inconsistencies with it, and I think it could have benefited with perhaps a couple more rewrites of the script just to get it tighter.
or just a finished script during production.
Or yeah, or just I think that may have helped. Um, the acting's not great. I think Sam Worthington's okay in the film, is serviceable as the main character. Anton Yelchin's pretty good, and obviously Michael Ironside. If you're looking for just a sort of sci-fi war action movie, sort of dystopian future one, it's pretty good. As a Terminator film, I'll agree it is pretty forgettable. There's not many memorable set pieces. It's all very loud, actiony, and I think that the focus should have been on the John Connor character,
Yeah,
getting to know him more and really start seeing the seeds of him becoming the leader more. Um, I was quite, I won't say upset, but I was a little disappointed when I heard that they weren't going to continue this series. Um, I think shortly after this film came out, the whole rights of Terminator went through a bit of turmoil, and there was a lot of people bidding on it, and then one production company had the rights, then they lost them again, and it was kind of all up in the air for a while. Then there was talks that James Cameron was going to have the rights back to them, but then since then, obviously, we've got Genesis, and they'll probably try and push for a trilogy with his new one. I think the rights revert back to James Cameron in around 2019. I think I've heard. So whether he'll choose to carry on with that after the Avatar films is finished, or if he'll just sort of retain them and not go back to it, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
As I say, even though it's set in the future, it's not really the future war we wanted to see as Terminator fans. It seemed like very much like a tread in water film, like more's to come in the sequels, which didn't happen unfortunately. But I think it's still a fairly solid watch. So I would check it out if you haven't seen it, but just don't get your hopes up. It's not like the Terminator films you probably are used to, and even Terminator 3, it very much follows in the same vein as Terminator 2. Obviously not as good. This one is sort of its own entity, single film on its own, but I think it's still okay.
I would say it's very bad.
Well, you and a lot of people would say it's very bad, but I don't know. Maybe I'll actually come out of Genesis sort of liking it or defending it in its corner, because I seem to be very apologetic for Terminator 3 and 4 for some reason. But we'll have to wait and see. So, yeah, that was our sort of little supplementary main show. Tom, thank you very much for coming in at the last minute to help me record these.
It's been a pleasure. I know I've perhaps been rambling a bit too much, but
no, we've been rambling about Michael Ironside, so it's all good. But no, it's been a good fun chatting movies with you again, man. So thanks for coming in.
Definitely, I'll do it again.
But Monday, me and George are going to be back. We're going to be reviewing the much hyped Terminator Genesis. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of strong opinions on that film, so that'll be our main show on Monday. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy or on Twitter at cinema_savvy. We're also on letterboxd.com, which is a great website for sort of the list of movies we've reviewed, and it's just a sort of good little hub for film fans, so you can check us out at letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy. Before we go, Tom, have you got any links of yours where people can find you, follow your stuff, follow your films, or your future prospects, or anything like that?
You can follow me on Twitter at Tomwood7, or you can go to my Facebook page. Hold on.
It's alright. Links will be in the description anyway. Yeah. I'll put them in there.
Yeah. Or you can follow my Facebook page of You Got Game.
You Got Game.
You Got Game.
So tell us a little bit about that before we sign out.
Right. Essentially, it is a Let's Play channel where me and someone else completely ramble for 30 minutes whilst playing video games.
Well, that's always good. I need to get back into gaming myself, man. So, what games do you have on there at the minute, or is this a new thing that you're going to be starting up?
It's something that we've kind of started a while ago, and I do want to try and get back in it. It's kind of hit the back burner at the minute because of other commitments and stuff. But we sort of play a variety of different things, like Diablo 3 we've got on there. We've got Injustice, Gods Among Us, and one of my favourite games, Earth Defense Force 2025. And so nice. we just kind of half an hour, 2 parts, just kind of ramble on about anything, absolutely anything.
Awesome. Well, that's You Got Game, right?
Yep, You Got Game.
So be sure to check that out, and it'd be good to get you back on the channel sometime.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Talk some movies about something, so we'll see if we can get something together for the future.
Yeah, definitely, I would love that.
But yeah, join us again Monday for our Terminator Genesis review, and until then, thanks for listening.
Thank you.